Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk, here in Scotland, the known capital of everything and everyone. I hope everybody is doing well and has had a good start to their week so far. Well, what a day today is and has been. It's May the 8th. For some parts of the world, it is May Day. It is not here. It's not May Day here, but still, in some parts of the world, it is May Day. For today, what makes today really, really cool, and some of you will already know about this, is that PreSonus have just launched the next generation of quantum interfaces. These are USB quantum interfaces. And, okay, they are a wee bit slower than their Thunderbolt counterparts, but they come with a whole bunch of new technology and new preamps. Basically, the next generation of preamps, which are way better than the preamps and the converters that are on the original Thunderbolt devices. These are frickin' awesome devices. And I would go so far as to argue that they are the best audio interfaces that we have ever made at PreSonus. These are outstanding devices. And so well worth exploring and taking a little look at. I know it's kind of out with the scope of Songwriting Simplified, but, you know, these devices do actually help you record your songs. So there's kind of tenuous link, possibly. But anyway, they are pretty cool devices. If you've not seen them, then I will, before we go any further, give you a very quick... Oops, that's the wrong screen. You should be seeing this one. I will give you a very quick sneak peek at what they look like. Here they are. So these are slightly lower budget devices. These are the Quantum ES devices. There's a 2-channel one and a 4-channel one. And then you have a 2-channel HD interface. And then this is the flagship one, the big boy. This is the HD8. It's freaking awesome with 8 inputs. And all of these have loopback capability. They have not just Xmax pre's. These are the next generation, built on the technology that PreSonus pioneered with the Xmax pre's. These are Max HD pre's that are in each of these devices. They're freaking awesome. And there is not a bit of plastic in these other than the buttons. Other than the buttons and the knobs, everything else, the chassis is metal. And these displays are glass with LED ladder metering on every interface. So these are well worth checking out. So go to presonus.com and check out the Quantums. These are amazing. And there's a close-up of some of them. And they all come with Studio One. In fact, they all come with Studio One Professional, believe it or not. Plus a new version of Universal Control and a new version of the My PreSonus app as well. So there they are, and there's some details here on what you get with the new Max HD pre's. And the performance of the converters, yeah, they're pretty... These guys are pretty sick, to be honest. So there you go. Go check those out. And I'm going to go back over here now that we've got that out of the way. So yes, I hope everybody is okay. Christina was first in the door, which is awesome. She was like 2.5 hours ahead of schedule. But she's here, which is awesome. Well done to you, Christina, for being first in the door. We got Stephen Wilson here as well. He was number 2. Followed by Chris Maragna, also here in plenty of time. So he was third in. Then we've got Aura's Boring Alice as well, from Saratoga, New York, which is awesome. I have been to New York. I've never been to Saratoga, though. That's one place I've never been. Let's see who else. We got Matt Cochran here, and we got Cal Traduziak, and we got Billy Morgan, and we got Don Oliver, we got Rich Cresswell, our resident composer genius, and we've got, who else do we have? We have Brett Marler as well, and we've got Lloyd from Paparazzi Music as well. So we've got quite a number of people here, and Brett says it's his 26th anniversary quitting tobacco. Good for you, my friend. Congratulations. I'm a few years down the road from you. In as much as it's going to be my 30th year next year, so 29 for me. So I'm a few years ahead of you, but I basically made the crazy, possibly absurd, possibly dangerous decision to quit drinking, smoking, and various recreational drugs all at the same time. Cold turkey. Maybe don't do that. A little bit dangerous. Kind of, yeah, nearly did me in. But I got rid of all three, which is great. And I have been free of addiction to all three. I haven't smoked in 29 years. I have not touched any drugs in all that time either. And I only have the occasional beer once in a while, especially at the Studio One meetups. That's probably my peak drinking time is at the Studio One meetups, where I'll go through, a couple of small cans of beer. But other than that, that's it. So Brett says, I want the big boy not only for its inputs, but the reamping capabilities, plus changing the levels. Phantom power from inside Studio One is dead sexy. Yes. Now the preamp control thing is not necessarily new technology. You can already do that with the current quantum interfaces and the Studio 192, and I think that's it, that you can control the preamps on. But yes, the integration is brand new, and there is an update. For universal control that gives you a load more control than you've ever had before over the interface and its usage. Like I said, they all have loopback as well, which is great for people like me who do that do streaming and make videos and that kind of thing. So there you go. So apparently there is also a Studio One meetup. I'm assuming that's tonight. Is that right? Kyle, is that tonight? 9 Eastern, 8 Central, 7 Mountain, and 6 Pacific. Okay, so 8 Central, that's going to be like 2 o'clock in the morning for me. So that's going to be like an hour after my show. So if I'm still awake, I might be there. But otherwise, yeah, probably not. Lloyd says the meetups will definitely drive you to drink. No, I kind of just drink whilst we chat, because I kind of like it that way. And I have the keys. I have the keys to the car to drive you. Yes, thank you, Lloyd. So there we go. That's the new Quantums. We also have an update to Studio One as well, which is 6.6.1, which is basically it's just a maintenance update, but it does include new templates for the Quantums. So if you have one of those devices, you will now be able to not only select that as an interface, but you'll also be able to use its bespoke template for recording, which will set you up with all of your channels all routed already for you. Oh yes, it's Massachusetts meetup, that's right. Dave Barcelow's meetup, yes. I had forgotten. It was his tonight. All right, so enough of the Presonus commercial. This show is not sponsored by Presonus in any way, shape, or form, even though I work for the company. It's not sponsored by Presonus. So as I say, Studio One 6.6.1. has some bug fixes, and it also, as I say, contains these new templates for the new interfaces. And that's pretty much it for Studio One 6.6.1, which is why I have not put a video out for it, because it is just a maintenance release. It doesn't really contain anything necessarily noteworthy for most people. So, does anybody have any songwriting questions? Any questions about songwriting, composing, arranging, music theory? We also do music theory questions. So if you've got any of those type of questions, get them in the chat as well. And I'm happy to kind of fill in some gaps as well. We can talk a little bit more harmony. We can talk a little bit more melody writing. We can talk writing for horns, that kind of stuff, whatever you guys want. Remember, these shows are for you and for your edification, for your knowledge, for your build up. That's what I'm here for, and that's what this show is for. So, like I said, you got questions, get them in the chat just now. Remember, please type at Jonny Lipsham Studios to start your question. That way, because what happens there is the chat for me shows my name in red, and I can pick that out from all the other stuff where you guys are just talking amongst yourselves. Maybe you're talking amongst yourselves about the new interfaces or the update to Universal Control, or maybe you're talking about, any other stuff. Yeah, having my name highlighted that way makes it just easy for me to read your questions. Cal says, R.I.P. Steve Albini. Yes, Steve Albini died, I think, today from a heart attack at the age of 61, which is no age at all to die. That's actually pretty young. And for those of you that don't know him, he was in a couple of very, very successful bands. And then he became a producer and a recording engineer, for which he won many, many, many awards and had many, many successful hit records. And I would argue was probably just kind of like at the peak of his powers when he very sadly had a heart attack of which he died. So that's very, very sad. He made a massive impact on the music business, for sure, and for the way that we record, and the way that records are produced. He strongly disliked being referred to as a producer because, to him, if you're a producer, you're kind of shaping the sound of how a record should sound in its end result, and that's not really what he liked to be referred to as, somebody that shapes the sound. He had a different approach to record production, which meant that sometimes he was at odds with record labels and what they wanted. All right, so Elusive1970 says, tips for playing keyboard to sound like a guitar. Well, first thing you got to have is a guitar sound in a virtual instrument. So that's going to be step one. Step two is you've got to think like a guitar player. So that's step two. So those are your first two approaches, I would say, to thinking about how we approach guitar on a MIDI keyboard. So let's go and grab a guitar sound. So I've got presence here, and we've got a Stratocaster, because Strats are cool. I like Strats. I actually prefer Strats to Tellies, to be honest. But I'm also very partial to a Gibson as well, especially, the 335, especially when the 335 is in the hands of none other than Mr. Larry Carlton. But I also like an Ibanez as well. I have an Ibanez, which my dad has at the moment, because he is giving it a little bit of TLC. It needs some repairs, and it needs restrung, and then the neck needs a little bit of tender loving care. So he's taking care of my guitar at the moment, but it's a semi-hollow body guitar, and it sounds freaking awesome. I love it. But Ibanez's also sound great when they're in the hands of somebody like Pat Metheny. So anyway, tips for making, for playing like a guitar. So if you have a sound, I mean, this one's pretty good. But it does, you know, this sound does sound a little kind of plasticky to me compared to a. Okay, let's try a different chord. So the first thing you got to do is you got to think like a guitar player. So you can't do crazy voicings like this. No, guitar players cannot play that. You know, open, big, wide open voicings like this. No, guitar players can't do that. So they're not going to be able. I mean, guitar players can play advanced, weird sounding chords. Just ask Alan Holdsworth, because if you want to see what can be done harmony-wise on a guitar, Alan Holdsworth is your man. If you want to see what can be done playing legato at phenomenal high speed, again, Alan Holdsworth is your man, because he was definitely one of the undisputed masters of legato style playing. So well worth checking out him for both kind of unusual kind of chords as well as very fast legato playing. So you're gonna have a decent sound to start with. Now this is okay. This is an okay sound, but there are, you know, you'll find that there are other virtual instruments out there that may actually be a little bit better. But then you got to think like a guitar player. So there are things that are going to work and things that aren't going to work. So, for example, hang on, let me just get my chair is stuck. There we go. So, for example, if we're going to play an A chord, or even an A6 chord. Sorry. If you're wondering what the problem I'm having is, the problem I'm having is that this keyboard is 31 years old, and it's the sensors are, should we just say, not quite as good as they used to be. So that's kind of what I'm battling with at the moment. So no, I'm not going to play that song. But yes, you got to think like a guitar player. So you got to voice your chords like a guitar player would. So there are chord voicings that you can use, and chord voicings that just aren't going to sound realistic. You know, especially if you're going to be doing like 5 or 6 note chord voicings. Some of them just aren't going to work, you know. Like, that sounds great, but you've got that there. That's not necessarily going to be something that is going to be playable on a guitar. So you've got to think about that. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have, you know, first-class understanding of how a guitar works to be able to do this. You don't, but you have to have a pretty good idea of what's going to be realistically possible. And the same for things like bends, okay? So The other thing to bear in mind is also things like key switches. So, for example, there are mutes and things. So you've got all sorts of different key switches as well, and then there's deads. These are important. And then of course slides. Some just, yeah, that you just wouldn't do that at all. And then there's these, the so got to bear all those kind of things in mind. So if we're going to do like finger picking, that kind of thing. That's a note you're not going to be able to play. So, yeah. Carl says, also when playing chords, some notes might be muted and some not. Yep, and using damp strings / pick noise to add rhythm sounds would be hard. Yes, so being able to capture everything in one performance on the keyboard is probably not going to be possible, because you're going to want to be able to trigger multiple sound variations, multiple key switches. So the best thing to do is kind of capture in a recording the essence of what you want to do, and then add some of these other things that Carl is talking about: mutes, deads, string squeak, all of those kind of things that are going to make for a really realistic sounding performance. So chord voicing is essential. Got to get those kind of things right. Making sure you're using the correct range on your keyboard. You know, you're not going to be able to go below an E, for example, below that low E string, because, you know, guitars just don't go down that low. So, got to bear those kind of things in mind. And so adding in kind of, you know, the sound effects like string squeaks, some mutes, some deads, all of those kind of things into your sound. Maybe you capture this on 2 or 3 different performances, or you add those things in as sound variations in editing. It does mean that getting a really good performance is going to take a long time, but if you want something that sounds realistic, it's going to be worth the effort. Now, for strumming is a little more tricky. However, I do have an ace up my sleeve for that. And that is this guy down here, VG Sparkle. Now, this is the virtual guitarist from UJam. And the cool thing about this is that this has a bunch of things already built into it. So, we could set the amp up to be clean. We're triggering the wrong instrument. Hang on just a second. So this is a really, really cool tool. And you can adjust the amount of swing as well. So, you know, if what you want is something that's a little bit more swung, you can adjust that. So we can, you know, so you can adjust all of that, and then you can adjust the feel to make it a little bit more humanized. And then there's a whole bunch of these different styles as well. So it's a cool little device here. You've got loads and loads of styles and playing techniques in here as well. So you got some octaves. You've got like some soulful ballad style things, which. All right, so UJam have a whole bunch of things. They've got a virtual drummer, which I've also got. I've got the VG Fat here. They also make a bass player. The VB Rowdy is my favorite one. So yeah, virtual guitarist, virtual drummer, virtual bassist. You can pretty much make a tune just using those three things, and then layer it up with some keyboards, and you're good to go. You've got your own personal rhythm section. Yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's on sale apparently. So if you like UJam stuff, and I certainly do, I'm a big fan of UJam. I think they are a great idea, especially if you're not a guitar player. I am a guitar player, but I'm not a great guitar player. Like I said, I can only play strange chords, and that's about it. So, and my strumming leaves a lot to be desired, and I don't really play with a plectrum because when I do, it just goes and I never see it again. So I abandoned plectrums, and it's basically fingerstyle only for me, which actually helps for playing the strange chord voicings because it sounds so much better when I'm not having to strum it. So there you go. Joe is here, my good friend Joe. Hello, Joe. Good to see you, buddy. I caught like maybe half of the mix critique with you and Gregor today. It was fantastic. And not just from the advice that you and Gregor gave, but also, man, the songs. Boy, the songs are really, really good. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm talking about mix critiques that Gregor and Joe do. I think it's every month. In Studio One Plus. So if you're a member of Studio One Plus, you get access to that kind of thing, and you can submit your song. And Joe and Gregor, they pick out 4 or 5 songs at random from submitted songs, and they basically have a listen, and they give really, really good advice. So there you go, shameless plug for that. And he says it's even a little bit out of tune, like a real guitar. It is definitely slightly out of tune, in a kind of really kind of pleasing way, which I never thought I would say as somebody who has perfect pitch. I never thought I'd ever say that something out of tune sounds pleasing, but it does. Anyway, yeah, every second Wednesday of the month. Yes, and it actually is a nice little lead in to what I do here. Anyway, the songs today were absolutely freaking awesome. Yeah, you're not kidding. So, Joe, I sent you a Skype message. Please check it out when you get a wee minute, because we need to have you on the show as a guest, because having your songwriting knowledge and experience would be freaking awesome. And I think we talked about it before, so we actually need to nail it down to a date and get you on here. Eddie has a question. Hello, Eddie. I think you're new here, and we got Shorty Beard in here as well. Yeah, we got a few people who have popped in whilst I was demoing. Eddie says, I'm a beginner who wants to write my own songs eventually. I can play triads, scales, and sevenths. What should come next? I would say get really good at playing triads, chords, and dominant chords. Get really good at knowing how the chords work together. So you can take the theoretical approach, like how chords should progress via voice leading and that kind of thing, and there's a lot of value there. That's the approach that I have taken my entire life. But mostly I have come to that not through reading books. I really didn't read books until I got to university. And when I did my postgraduate degree, boy, did I have to read books. But prior to that, really, I didn't have any friends when I was a kid. Hard to believe, I know, because I have this roaring, glowing personality and amazing, sparkling, slightly sarcastic, very dry sense of humor that should be completely endearing, but really didn't attract people. So my mother's record player and her and my dad's record collection were my friends. So I listened to a lot of music, not just jazz music. I mean, I grew up with jazz music because that's what my parents did. So I followed in the family tradition that goes back many generations of being jazz musicians. But you know, they had music by all sorts of groups. They had music by the Eagles. They had some rock music. They had Billy Joel. They had Elton John. They had all sorts of music at home that I listened to a lot. But yes, I did listen to an awful lot of Charlie Parker. I listened to an awful lot of John Coltrane. I listened to an awful lot of Miles Davis. And then after nearly wearing out my mother's Charlie Parker records, I then discovered a brilliant funk band from Scotland, my homeland, called Average White Band. And from there, I discovered that the Brecker brothers, Mike and Randy Brecker, had been basically the horn section for Average White Band on their first 2 or 3 records. And from there, I discovered that they had their own band called the Brecker Brothers Band, which was like a whole new world of funk music. And from there, I discovered Jaco Pastorius and Weather Report and all of that. But anyway, that's kind of a whole nother story. But really, what I'm trying to say here is get good at the things that you can already do, and you get really, really good at them. So, learning about chord voicing and voice leading is going to make even really basic triads and dominant chords sound really, really nice. So I'm going to give you, and even actually sophisticated. So I'm going to give you a little example of this, of how you can make simple sound sophisticated. And if you listen to great songwriters like Lennon and McCartney, Simon and Garfunkel, Rodgers and Hammerstein, the Gershwin brothers, dare I say it, Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, Ellington and Strayhorn, and of course, obviously Becker and Fagan. But if you listen to those great songwriters, their knack is for making the simple sound sublime and sound sophisticated. So let's take a little example of what we can do with some major sevenths and some minor sevenths. So I even put a little blue third in there at the end. But essentially, what was I doing there? C major 7. A minor 7, just moving one finger in my right hand to give me a minor 9. And then, to get that major 7, just moving the G up to the A. passing bass note. And then, of course, the D over the C major just makes that really nice kind of Lydian kind of sound, which I like. It's, you know, just having the F sharp in a C major chord. It doesn't belong, it doesn't fit, but it sounds really, really nice. So there's just an example of just some simple chord voicings for C, A minor, F, major 7, and G7. Get really, really good at those. Now, once you get really, really good at those, then you can start exploring the world of secondary dominant chords and secondary major 7th chords. These are chords that may be part of the key, but also may be borrowed from other keys that can just add some color and some sparkle to your music. So, secondary dominance. So, D minor, chord 2 in the key of C major is perfect for this, because then this leads to chord 5, to chord 1, and this is what we call our perfect cadence. In the jazz world, we call this a 2-5-1, and pretty much all jazz music is based around a 2-5-1 of some kind. Worth learning these in all keys, because they will unlock being able to go from one key to another key with effortless ease and in such a way that deceives your listener to the point where they have no idea they've even left the home key. But you've added a whole bunch of sparkle and color that you otherwise wouldn't have. So chord 2 is what is a secondary dominant. Chord 3 is E minor, which leads to chord 6, which leads to chord 2, which leads to chord 5, and you can go around this. And eventually, I'm adding a little bit of color here with a sharp 5 in the A chord, and I've made it into a dominant by putting the major 3rd in there. And the cool thing about that is that that C sharp resolves into the D for the D minor. So those are really important. 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. So secondary dominance is kind of like your next logical step from, you know, kind of primary color chords. What I like to call them 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. You know, 1, chord 6, A minor, 2, 5, 1. I mean, these are kind of like the basis of tunes like I Got Rhythm, for example, by George Nara Gershwin. That's a really important song to check out, even if you're not a jazz guy at all. Like, I know my dear friend Joe is not a jazz guy at all, but I'm hoping to convert him at some point. But, you know, the chord changes to I Got Rhythm are so good that they are worth learning and then using in your own songs, because chord changes are not copyrighted, so you can use the chord changes to I Got Rhythm, put your own melody on top of them, do your own arrangement of them, and, you know, you can make your own song based out of those chord changes. You could do the same to How High the Moon, or what, you know, Strange Fruit, or any other, you know, standard song you could you know, build something out of. But it's the other great thing about something like I Got Rhythm is because of how those chords work. You get to see how good chord changes for great songs work, and then from there you can then learn how to apply those kind of things to your own songwriting. So the chord changes to I Got Rhythm, How High the Moon, those are two that I think are really, really cool, really, really important. Because, you know, they are the bedrock of popular music. I mean, you'll hear the chord changes to How High the Moon in a bunch of pop songs that you just never thought, huh? You know, oh, really? Yes, really. You find them cropping up in songs by all sorts of artists, you know, Beyonce being one. Beyonce's written a song that has pretty much the entire chord changes and of the A section of I Got Rhythm. So, you know, you find these cropping up everywhere. Lloyd, that's very naughty, but very, very funny. Or just get the Unison MIDI chord pack. You could get the Unison MIDI chord pack, but that is pretty much and I'm not going to say the word an SCAM. Eddie says, great, I fear I would keep adding other things to try and cover way too much. Now I can invest in what I know already until I master it. Yeah, getting really good at what you can already do is important, because from there you can then start to add new sounds and new things to it. I mean, that was always my approach. You know, growing up as a kid, I mean, I didn't really take to piano until my early teens. I was a drummer first. I started playing drums when I was about 2 years old, and I still play. And then when I was 9, I started playing upright bass, because I saw Herbie Hancock's bassist Ron Carter, and then I saw the amazing Jimmy Garrison, who was Coltrane's bass player. And I thought, man, I just want to do what they're doing. And particularly Ron Carter and Ray Brown, two of the finest upright bass players on the planet. So that's where I started. And then, of course, like I said, I discovered funk music and I discovered Jaco Pastorius. So the upright bass got sold. Actually, before it got sold, it destroyed itself because I left it in a room that was warmer than it should have been, and it exploded. And so then I bought a fretless bass, and I started playing, you know, Weather Report stuff and Jaco Pastorius stuff on my fretless, and then I discovered the great Victor Bailey, and he was doing slapping things that I thought were awesome. And of course, Mark King, the slap bass maestro. And so I also got a fretted bass and started doing some slapping as well. So I didn't really get into piano until a wee bit later in life, but I love the piano. I love what you can do on a piano. But yes, so I've never had any lessons on piano at all. But I've developed my own harmonic vocabulary based upon listening to good piano players and listening to good recordings. And then basically just trying to pick out by ear what I'm hearing, and then trying to work out how all of those things work together to not only make the great sound, but make the chords work together as a set of chord changes. So my harmonic vocabulary was actually fairly limited to start with. It was just, you know, major 7, minor 7s, and dominant 7s, and then 9ths. That was basically the limit of my harmonic vocabulary, was up to the 9th. And 9ths sound really great. But here's another great trick is, you know, if you're working on a song that just has a vamp on one chord, and this is something I learned from listening to James Brown's Sex Machine, because it's in the guitar part, and the guitar part sounds bonkers and fantastic, but basically it's doing this. So what is that doing there? That's basically a D9 chord going to a D6 chord and then back. That's all it is. And what does that do? That provides a little bit of extra color going up to that 6th, going to the 6, the D, F sharp and the B, and then back to the 9th, which is basically C, E, F sharp, A. I mean, if you want, you can just keep those two static and just move the top and bottom notes. It adds interest, and it keeps something that is otherwise, harmonically static, like that first whole section of Sex Machine is pretty much static. It's because it's a groove. It's just a vamp on a single chord. And it's that gives it that kind of sense of propulsion, forward motion, and interest. If you're just going... That's all fine, but it's not nearly as interesting as... So that was from hearing a guitar part and going, oh, that sounds great. I've got to pick this out on the keyboard. So I did. And then, of course, there's that next section, which basically goes... which basically is... It's just basically going down, C, and then D flat, and then back. So it's basically just going... And it's just like, it's great. And you could do that on the chord 4. So yeah, so those are kind of things that will work for you. To make something kind of interesting. Let's see. I've play major 7th chords. That's jazz. Well, some of it's jazz, yes. But if you add like things like sharp 11s and 9s to it, Joe, then yes, you get something very, very pleasing and jazzy. Let's see. Yeah, it's all kind of fun stuff. So let's see. What else have I missed? Big Bad Voodoo Daddy borrowed the Lester changes for the B part of You and Me and Bottle Makes 3. Oh yeah, it did. Yeah, you're right. Ron Carter had a birthday the other day. Yeah, I believe he's 82. Eddie says, I dream full arrangements. Even in my head, I have full songs. It's always been like that, but I've never known any instruments, so it's kept inside until now, I guess. Welcome to my world. You and I are very much alike. That's exactly what goes on in my head. I have, like you, I have full arrangements in my head. I know how every part sounds and how it should sound. And so the struggle of my life has been learning how to get those sounds out of my head and into something like Studio One, and then I hear the sound come out of the speakers, and then it's a matter of then tweaking and adjusting until what comes out the speakers is exactly what's in here. So, and that provides some of the hardest challenge, because I know what the keyboard parts should sound like, and I know what those chords sound like, but maybe I don't know what they actually are. I know how they sound in my head, but I don't know what they actually are. And so then it's just a case of like playing the voicing on the piano and then trying to work out where essential chord tones are, like where's the root, where's the third, where's the seventh, be that a major seventh or a dominant seventh. Are there any extensions in this chord? Are there things like 13ths? Are there sharp 11s? Are there flat 9s or sharp 9s? Or is there a sharp 5 in there? But the essential building blocks of a chord, the root, the third, and the seventh, those three are the bare essentials of any chord. So root, third, seventh. Once you've got those, or major seventh, once you've got those, you can do anything. You can add anything on the top of it, and it will sound great, pretty much. So 7, 9. Okay, let's take that a step further. Sharp 11, those work great with major sevenths, but they also sound great with a flat 7 as well. So let's keep it with a flat 7. Let's add another minor third on top of that, and there's the 13th. Now we can lose the 5 because we don't need the 5 when we got the extensions on the top. The fifth of a chord is not necessarily an essential tone. A lot of people don't realize that. It's not necessarily an essential tone in a chord. It can be left out. The essentials, root, third, seventh. Everything else on top of that is color. Unless you are flatting or sharping the 5, in which case you need to kind of know where it is in the chord so you can flat it or sharp it. But otherwise, you can leave it out. So all you really need is the root, the third, and the seventh. And then anything else on top of that is just color tones. And then, color tones are great because color tones provide extra notes that maybe don't belong to the scale but sound, or the key that the chord is based in, but they sound fantastic. And you can use those extension chord tones for building a melody. So the notes of the chord can provide the notes that you can either improvise with or you can build a melody out of for your song. And then after that, it's learning how each of these notes move nice and smoothly between one chord and the next. So if I take that 7th chord and then I want to go to F major 7, well, I move the root obviously, and I can keep the E there because that's the major 7th, and then I just move the B flat down to an A. And that's really, really smooth voice leading. And it works. It's smooth as a baby's behind. And it works. So even if I add extra notes on top of that, so even if I add the 9th on top of that, I'm only moving 2 notes. That's all I'm doing. I'm just moving 2 notes. And the bass note, obviously. And it just works. So that's why I said at the start, to answer your question, Eddie, is take what you already know, things like triads, things like major 7ths, minor 7ths, dominant 7ths, and find how you can make those chords work together with the smoothest possible voice leading between one chord and the next. This will take some practice. But once you have that smooth voice leading, even between simple chord changes like, the 3-6-2-5-1, E minor, A minor, D minor, G7, C major 7. Once you've got that down in one key that you're really familiar with, Try it out on another one. Try it on F major. Try it out on G major. Try it out on and then, you know, just try it out on chord key centers you're not familiar with, like B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat. Why not do it in G flat major 7? You know, chord 3 is going to be B flat minor 6, and there it is in G flat, and it sounds really sophisticated, but it's not. It's just moving the chord tones by the least possible distance. So just those two notes changed. And then so basically, to go from A flat minor to D flat 7, I just move one finger. And there, I'm in G flat major. So work it out, develop a system of voice leading in one key, and then work that out into all 12 keys. Now, I know most people don't write in C flat major or even in G flat major. Most songs are never written in those keys, but useful to know them. Why? Because if you are going to do something more complicated and sophisticated, like substituting one chord for another, borrowing a chord from a completely different key, if you know them and you know where they are and you know how to voice lead between one and the next in any key, then you'll be able to do really, really smooth, sophisticated harmony without it really being sophisticated harmony. Just using what you already know: triads, major 7s, minor 7s, dominant 7s. And then you can add the color tones on top of that. So Eddie, I hope that really helps you out. And yes, if you can play major 7s, you can also play minor 9s. Absolutely correct. All right, we are like 10-12 minutes over here. So yeah, I kind of got carried away there. But anyway, I need to catch up with people who have dropped in. Eddie, Joe, and Anonymous Housewife as well has said hello. And Billy Morgan is flagging up the Studio One meetup afterwards, which is actually at 2. Yeah, that's at 2 a.m. for me. That might be a little late for me. Shorty Beard says, want to make your brain detune your guitar to E flat or D standard and then learn songs in different shapes or voicings. Can be great for recording using multiple guitars. Definitely. I've even heard Joe talk about different tunings and things for creating really interesting voicings and then having, you know, layering different guitars and different tunings. Can certainly be something that's pretty cool. All right, so there we go. That is it for tonight's show. Thank you, everybody, for coming. You guys are awesome. You guys are the best. And I will see you all on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. Have a good one, folks. Good night.